Hey there, Malcontents. How are you doing? This here is the Malcontent, and welcome to Studio 2. Finally did it. I've been talking about Studio 2 for months. This is the first night in Studio 2. Things are going to be a little hinky because it's the first night, and I'm actually hoping you can hear me. And with that said, because we did the test screen, let me go here and get your comments, and let me just make sure you're saying in your comments, yes, we can hear you, Malcontent. And remember, it's going to take about 20 seconds for that to get from there to here to here to there to that to this. And then I'm going to know that y'all can actually hear me. So we are going to be talking tonight, assuming that you can hear me right now. And there's no echo. That's the other thing. Sometimes we do a new setup, we get echo, we get, right? So we're you hear me! With no, like people aren't going echoey either. So good. We're in business. We're just going to put that behind. Again, welcome to Studio 2. So let me explain to you Studio 2 a little bit. We have a marketing agency and we went like all in December of last year. Been doing it for almost 4 years, went all in. And we built a studio. And this is you're seeing one side of the studio here. And then we went and we did our documentary trip in February. We came back and COVID. And we've actually have never used this studio with people in it because of COVID. It's only about 300 square feet. So it's a smaller studio. So it's very, very hard to do proper social distancing in here. You can really only crew up with maybe 3 people total. One talent, 2 people behind the camera. So I'm totally solo in here. But we just kind of reached a point of, we have all this equipment, we set up the room, let's start using it for something because it's just been sitting kind of as idle space. And so there you go. And here we are. So the reason that I've done this tonight is not to talk about Studio 2, but wow, debate night. Let's talk a little bit about debate night and some of my thoughts on what we had for the debate. So the first thought, here's the thing, like who won? I think the edge goes to Biden, but there were no killing blows. Neither candidate. I mean, I get that Trump is the incumbent, but neither candidate, because essentially they're candidates. So Trump supporters he's not a candidate. Don't get pedantic on my ass. Neither scored a killing blow. And if you're sitting there going, they scored a killing blow, you're just being really biased. However, Biden, where was the bar set for Biden by the Republican Party and by Trump surrogates, by Trump itself? Basically, the argument was Biden wouldn't be able to send for 90 minutes. One of the things the Biden campaign asked for was actually 2 breaks at 30-minute intervals. And the Trump thought, no, you're not going to get your breaks. And the Biden campaign said, all right, fine, we don't get the breaks. Biden was lucid. Biden was able to answer the questions. His thoughts were clear. There was a couple of things where Trump tried to zing him, like name somebody, name him, name her, name her. It's like it was Kellyanne Conway. He might have had to think for about a second, but he was right. And we'll get into the fact checking a little bit. We were fact checking as fast as we possibly could in real time. And if you were watching in the watch party with us that we had from C-SPAN 2, in the comments, we were doing a lot of fact checking thing. This shouldn't really come as a lot of surprise to anybody that isn't just completely biased in the view. Trump said a lot more fake things, patently false or mostly false things than Biden. Biden said one thing that was false, and he said a couple of things that were neutral or not fully true, but for the most part, he was fully truthful. As a matter of fact, in some of the things, Biden was very conservative on. For example, when I say conservative, not conservative politics, conservative in his answers. Let me give you an example of that. One of the things was if ACA ends and we end protection for people with pre-existing conditions, 100 million people with pre-existing conditions could then be essentially trapped in their insurance plans. So we fact-checked that in real time. And what we found from the government's own information, from Medicare, Medicaid information, 129 million Americans actually have pre-existing conditions. And so the number would be closer to 129 million Americans would be potentially losing or trapped in their healthcare plans or would lose treatment if they move to another healthcare plan if coverage for pre-existing conditions were gone. Trump said the number was nowhere near that high. Biden said 100 million. So we can get real pedantic and say, well, Biden was kind of not true, but what you're arguing is Trump saying the number's lower than 100 million, Biden saying it's 100 million, the actual number is 129 million. Another example where Biden was conservative is he was talking about how much crime dropped when Obama was president. And the number that he trotted out was 17%. He immediately said 15%. So we looked it up. FBI statistics from 2008 to 2016. So those are the years that Obama was president. Crime in the United States dropped, according to the FBI, 16.5%. So the 17% you kind of rate as pedantic, because you could round 16.5 to 17, pedantic, but it's mostly true. It's not untrue. It's mostly true, right? If the number was 10%, you would go, it's untrue. Or if the number was even 14%, you would say 17% is untrue. It's pedantic, but you could say mostly true. 15%, it's true and it's conservative. So just a couple of examples there. Back to the Kellyanne Conway comment, right? Where Kellyanne Conway did say that chaos and violence helps the Trump campaign. She did say it. That was a easy one to fact check. Another one where we live in the Seattle anarchist jurisdiction. Trump looked in the camera. Well, he didn't really do a whole lot of looking in the camera. He did a whole lot of this, which I actually get. Now, I'm going to get into that in a little bit, minute, as somebody who is a videographer and somebody who works, I have to say now, on both sides of the camera. But Trump did a lot of this, and we'll get into that. But the point that I was going to make there, God, where was I going with that? Kellyanne Conway, blah, blah. Oh, Seattle and the Seattle anarchist jurisdiction. The point that I want to make here with the Seattle anarchist jurisdiction is, Trump, we got Seattle back. Then why are we an anarchist jurisdiction if you got Seattle back? Why was there a riot on Saturday? Now, when I say riot, that's Seattle police declared it a riot. Why was there a riot on Saturday if you got Seattle back? Why is the Seattle police chief saying that the protesters are wearing down the morale, the resolve, and the resources of the police department this weekend if you got Seattle back? You were like, we sent the federal troops, we sent feds to Seattle, and everything stopped. Like, wait, what? I mean, look, I'm not slagging out where I live. I'm just like, you could be a flippin', like, so what? The Proud Boys aren't coming anywhere here anymore? Because, right? It's all covered. And we'll get into that one here in a minute. But I want to get into this. I get what Trump was doing. I really do. And people are watching, oh, he's going to give Trump. Look, I call it as I see it, right? And I'm going to give Trump this. But his handlers need to talk. And of course, the thing is, he don't listen. So that's a whole separate issue. But his handlers need to talk. He's doing a lot of this because ultimately he's looking at Joe Biden. And he's listening to Joe Biden. Well, it's not good optics, right? Right? Joe looked into the camera. Joe addressed the camera. Now, you could sit there and go, well, Joe was being disrespectful because he wasn't looking at Trump. There could be a little element of that. However, from the viewer on TV, right, Trump was kind of Nixonian. And the first major TV debates were Nixon versus Kennedy. And Nixon's color, like his makeup was bad. He was sweaty. He didn't look into the camera at times. And it really killed him in this. Now, we live in a different era and a different age right now. And if anything, COVID has set the bar a little bit lower on what people's expectations are for people on camera. But Trump would have been better served at the end of the day had he done a lot of what I'm doing right now, looking into the camera and going, my fellow Americans. So let's talk about that. So, it's like, if I do this as a baseball game, this game was like 3-5 is the final score. And it was one of those baseball games. And if you don't watch baseball, right, it's 9 innings. So I'll just explain it. It's one of those games where it's like, it's not like the team went out and scored 5 runs in the second inning and then the other team kind of chipped away. This really was score a run, score a run, score a run, score a run, score 2 runs, score a run, score another run, 5-3. That's really how it kind of played out. And that's my view. If I look at that through a more objective lens, then can Biden simply stand up for 90 minutes? There's another thing that I'm just going to call out here. When Trump walked out and when Trump left, so when he enters to the podium and when he left for the podium, he has a weird gait. He is leaning forward, he has a halting gait, and he immediately was leaning forward, embracing himself on the podium. If there's somebody that looks kind of unhealthy, unwell, just in their gait, and by the fact that he was immediately bracing himself up on the podium and leaning forward, you got to say that this is a zing against Donald Trump. If you're going to argue Biden is unwell, Biden is this, Biden's that, whatever, right? Both parties apparently agreed to have inspections to make sure they don't have earpieces. It's just like, it's so ridiculous. Let's talk about a couple other things here, particularly about voter fraud, because this is really important. Donald Trump brought up Pennsylvania. First of all, he brought up two things in Pennsylvania. We're going to talk about both of them. The first one in Pennsylvania was they found ballots in the trash can. They were all for me. They did find 9 ballots in a trash can. The FBI then came out and went through a bunch of trash dumpsters, and they only found 9 ballots. The ballots were what they call naked ballots, with the exception of 1. So 8 were naked ballots. The Republicans in Pennsylvania fought in court and won that naked ballots don't get counted. So that's where they would go, into the trash. They were naked ballots. There was 1 that wasn't. 7 were for Trump. We don't know who the other 2 are for. So we actually don't know the full reality of that. But let's stick to the truth. Now, is Donald Trump correct? In this statement, there were ballots in the trash can. Yes, he's 100% correct. But 8 of those 9 ballots were ballots that were just going to go to the trash can because they're these so-called naked ballots. They essentially, the outside of the ballot was not completed right by the person that sent the ballot in. And the Republican Party argued, and the courts agreed, that that's an invalidated ballot. It's their rules. They set it up. So that's number one. Let's go to West Virginia. He talked about West Virginia, right? And this thing about postman selling ballots. That actually isn't true. There was an incident in 2019 where a postman was caught changing party alignment on 5 different ballot applications, not ballots. That was in 2019. We have the links in the feed, and you can go through in the fact check links for this. He changed those 5 party affiliations from Democrat to Republican. So again, this is benefit Trump. So is it factual? Yes. But who committed the voter fraud? Well, his own party committed the voter fraud. So right now, factual, yes, but we're 0 for 2. And also, what are we talking a total of? We are talking a total of 6 ballots. No, we're not. We're talking about a total of 14 ballots. No, because 8 of those were naked ballots, which don't count by the Republican Party. So there was only 1 in Pennsylvania in the trash can, and we're talking 5. So now we're talking a total of 6 ballots. That's it. Why did this turn off? Okay, we're just going to keep rolling here for a minute, but I just noticed that a part of my hardware has turned off, and I don't know why. Oh, now I've lost camera. Well, ain't that something? I don't know why I just lost camera. Bear with me here, Malcontent. I don't know what just happened, but we lost camera. It's the joy of live production and doing it by yourself. Okay, I actually even kind of lost my entire train of thought in losing camera there. The other thing is let me just check your comments here. I'm not even seeing your comments. That's great. Are there no comments? Oh, here's all sorts of comments. All right. I'm going to just assume you guys could hear me and see me, and we're just going to keep rolling here. I guess I was talking about the voter fraud, right? And we're up to 6 ballots. That's where I was at. We're up to 6 ballots. All right. So now let's go back to Pennsylvania. He said that poll watchers were thrown out of Philadelphia. There are multiple news stories. If you do a Google search, it's not true. It's completely untrue. So when that was that one, it is completely untrue that poll watchers were thrown out in Philadelphia. Didn't happen. Fake news. Wrong. Not true. So we have that. Now, let's get into the things that should be concerning that came out of this. Trump was asked, would he wait to declare victory until there was a certified result from the election? He basically didn't answer the question, which essentially, of course, we mean is no, because he's already positioning that the election is going to be stolen from him. We already can see this because when you look at the numbers are not looking good for Trump. If you look at 538, and I get that 538 probably leans a little left, but even if you look at the Real Clear Politics, which probably leans a little to the right, if you look at the RCP, the numbers are not good for him. And Biden has a pretty significant firewall that he has built on the number of kind of swing states that he could lose and still become president of the United States at this point. And there are states that for Trump shouldn't be in play that are in play. For instance, Ohio, Iowa, Georgia, and North Carolina. All 4 of these states are in play. Two of those 4 states they just listed right now are considered light blue. They're toss up, but slightly lean Biden. Like Ohio is right on the knife's edge. North Carolina is a little close, a little more in Biden's camp. Georgia is a little more, and Georgia and Iowa it's Iowa and then Georgia. Iowa is about as solid for Trump as North Carolina is for Biden. So it's, and Georgia is a little more solid at that point. But he has this significant firewall. He was asked to essentially condemn and disavow white nationalists. The Proud Boys got a shout out directly. And Trump said directly to the Proud Boys, stand back and stand by, which basically is just an endorsement. So let's be really clear on who the brown shirts are serving the Trump administration if we use parallels to, say, 1932 Germany. Now, here's a couple of things that you got to understand in your history. We'll have a little bit of a history lesson here. In Germany in 1932, what you had is the party that Adolf was aligned to. I avoid saying it. The reason if I say the word, the chuds start reporting, see, he's talking about those awful people. He is. And this is how come some streamers are getting handed down there. So that's why I never say, don't say the C word. I say C disease. Got to be a little one step ahead of the chuds. Chuds, by the way, stands for people are hearing chuds. Cannibalistic Humanoid Underground Dwellers. It was a awful movie from 1984, like a cult. It's considered a cult classic. It's a terrible movie. It's basically unwatchable, and it is about cannibalistic human underground dwellers. So that's where the term chuds comes from. Now, this ties into my thoughts on Portland, because I know people have been kind of wondering, what are my thoughts on Portland and, what happened down there? So, and I talked in some of my streams, but of course, what happened in Portland? Proud Boys said up to 10,000 people are going to come. The reality of who came was about 400 to 500 people. And by all reports, there were 400 to 500 people over at the Proud Boys on their half of Delta Park. And by all reports, there were probably 150, 200 reporters there from all around the world. Now, I know somebody is furiously getting ready to type, but CNN said there was 1,000 people there, you liar. And I know you love CNN. CNN went off of what the Portland Police Department said, which said there was a total of 1,000 people in Delta Park. There was a counter protest in Delta Park. We were there filming it over at Van Pool, less than a mile away, but still in Delta Park. So that was on the western side of the park. The Proud Boys were on the eastern side of the park. And there were about 500 people there, probably about 400 of them counter protesters. And then in addition to that, probably about 100 people in the press and media, including yours truly. You're not press. Yes, I am. I've actually written stories for online publications. And let's not forget, Mike Solon says I'm press. He put it in a tweet. So I'm press. Remember we had this whole thing about my press badge. Here's an a-hole with a camera. Whatever, bro. What happened? Not a whole lot showed up. They didn't even get closer to the 10,000 numbers. The other thing that happened is the Portland police came in, and yeah, there's videos of the Portland police being very, very chummy and probably too chummy with the Proud Boys. And there were arrests. There were, and the Proud Boys can't go. There wasn't. There were arrests. There were weapon confiscations. They had shields and because I'm calling this out because people that support these people, whenever they see pictures of Antifa, whatever the hell that's supposed to mean, has shields. Go, see, they're violent. They have shields. I see. Well, the Proud Boys had trucks full of shields and campers full of shields, and they're handing out shields. And all this is on multiple, because remember, there's 150, 200 reporters there. So you can't deny any of this flipping happened. And we know that there were arrests. There were drunk driving arrests. There were assault arrests. There were people that had felony warrants. Isn't that amazing? Somebody is at a rally preaching law and order, and they have felony warrants. All right, however you want to unpack that, you can go ahead and unpack that. All this is cold, hard facts. And yes, there were arrests that night, which of course we filmed, but the ACLU and even the governor of Oregon now is calling for investigation on those arrests because, quite frankly, just about every person that was on the ground, press or otherwise, really walked away from downtown Portland that night scratching their heads going, what the hell just happened down here? This doesn't even make sense. Basically, they were like arresting people. There was one person, well, I'll give you an example. There was one person who is guiding a blind person. The blind person can't move fast. The blind person wanted to be at the protest. They arrested the guide for the blind person because they weren't moving too fast enough, and then they left the blind person behind with no guide. How the hell is that protecting and serving? Just take as long as you need to unpack that one. There's another one where apparently somebody in the press literally put 1 foot for like 2 seconds on the street. Now, if you follow my streams, I hopped off sideways to the street because of pole cam going around trees. So I did this a bunch of times. And they were snatched up and arrested by the jumpers. They call them the jumpers there because the jump out boys, because they show up in the vans and boom, they jump out. And then they did this really weird Seattle light thing where they pushed everyone out of the park and they kind of chased everybody around for 3 blocks on flat pavement and then left. And then everyone just went back to the park. And to me, I was like, when they started the chasing thing, I was like, you have to be kidding me. I'm getting a cardio experience here too. At least it's flat. No, there was no cardio. There was like, you kind of trotted for a block and then everyone rested and you trot. And look, compared to Seattle Police Department, Portland Police, they're fit. Man, they're fast. They're flipping fast. They're just like, whoom. It's amazing how fast they are. You're slacking Seattle. But of course, maybe this is the difference between marathon runners and sprinters. Maybe they're sprinters and that's it. And neither here nor there. At the end of the day, things were crazier in Seattle than they were in Portland. But here's the whole point. I left Portland feeling a little bit more encouraged because the Proud Boys were a big no-show. And there was a whole bunch of like rumors and stuff flying around and none of it materialized. They ended their rally, right? They were supposed to be there noon to 3. They have it on video, like 1:30. They're packing up and leaving because it was like it was down and they just went to Vancouver, Washington afterwards, most of them. And a few went into downtown Portland and kind of rolled around. We saw a couple, like I said in the stream, we had like 3 or 4 of like, Trump flag vehicles and stuff. And I was thinking, oh no, here we go. I got a little excited when I saw this because it was at this intersection. I couldn't see because of the buildings, how many were coming around. It's just 3 or 4 vehicles that came around and there was nothing that happened there. And I'm a little heartened by this. And I went into why I think what happened in Portland happened. And basically, I'll get into the really short version of that. And the really short version of that is we know from managing multiple web properties that there are a ton of trolls, bots, and fake accounts, and we know how to spot them. And within those engines, when they see certain keywords, certain things, the trolls, the bots, and the fake accounts go in to amplify the voice. And we, as a media solution and the admin and the mod teams, we sweep them out. And the reality is, what we could do, because we have this option, is we could hide their comments. Now, if somebody's spamming, and a lot of bots do like spamming, no. But for people to make the occasional comments, we could hide them. They actually don't know that we've hidden the comment. They would just go, how come's no one responding to my comment? But we still have the like or follow. But I'm not obsessed with likes or follows. I never have been. And that's not what I do, and it's not what it's about. And, if we kept some of those chuds in there, and I just told my mods and admin team, we would seriously probably have double the followers we have right now. And it would benefit the AI, and there would be other things that go into all of that if we did that. What I think happened is that they were eating the smell of their own farts, essentially. I think what happened where they expected 10,000 people is they were spooked. I say that spooked in the military term. They were spooked, they were psyopsed by their own supporters, in a way. Not that I think that a Proud Boy was in there going, okay, let me go to account number 1 and let me go to account number 2 and typing it in, but that other people with fake accounts who had no intention of getting out of mom's basement, because the reality is they're just cowards and they would never come out of mom's basement, but they like to talk tough. And then the bots and the troll farms like, yeah, we're coming, we're going to destroy everything and kill everybody, and it'll be the end of Antifa. And of course, there were a couple of skirmishes. There were a couple that showed up and stuff, but that was it. Was in the end. And so they're not as big, they're not as organized, and they're not as powerful. And what I heard from multiple people that went over and did the interviews was nobody had like a coherent platform. If you tried to go, what do you guys stand for? It was all kind of, it's like trying to talk to Trump, right? Yeah, we're this, we're that, we're this, but we're not that, and we're this. So is it scary that the white nationalist community today basically got an endorsement from Trump to wait for orders to kick ass? Absolutely. It's absolutely terrifying. Are they as big and organized as they appear to be? No. And I know I'm probably going to get shit for saying that and blah, 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 and probably some hate mail and probably get the caller ID block calls again. But it's not showing, right? The proof is in the showing. And, event after event after event. And things like Charlottesville and things that happened, say, in Portland maybe 6 weeks ago, these are the outliers, right? Most of the events that we're kind of seeing here is, oh, we're going to have 1,000 people show up and 50 or 100 people show up. And this has been the case in all my life, right? When the Ku Klux Klan in the 80s was still had some clout and they could get things, it was to be the same thing. It would be like, there's going to be hundreds of us, and it would be like 15. And it would be 100 cops there surrounding them to make sure basically they didn't get killed by 5,000 people. Who don't want the Ku Klux Klan there. So the numbers aren't exactly like that, and the Proud Boys use terrifying tactics. There's no denying any of that. But the endorsement of our president of white nationalist doctrine, neo-Nazi doctrine, is, of course, terrifying. And something I started to also talk about before we had some equipment issues is if you go back to 1932, a certain party that I had started to talk about, he only got 37% of the vote. That's all he ever got. The Reichstag legally gave him power. So the Reichstag essentially gave Adolf emergency power to be a dictator for 2 years, and he never gave it back. And then you had the Reichstag fire, which ironically, history does appear that it was set by this Dutch person who was a communist. History does appear to show that. However, he was intercepted by Adolf's people who were going in to set a false flag fire in there to find this guy setting the fire. And they're like, we just struck gold. We can blame somebody. And that's really how the history went down. And my little clicker thing is dead again. And I have to figure out what's going on with that for the future. So when I go to end the show, I'm going to have to walk over to the keyboard. I'm not going to use a little clicker thingy. All right. I've kind of spoke my piece about all of this. We'll go to your questions and comments. You're going to see me doing some of this stuff because I got you right here. I got you right here. There we go. Lots of people watching. LOLs. Lots of people watching. You can also start asking your questions here. It's a good point to ask your questions. Oh, and if you love this stuff and you love our moderators, spam those hearts because we're paid in hearts. That makes us feel like, worthwhile and why we're doing this stuff here. I loved your coverage of Vanport. Who was the speaker? There were a ton of incredibly powerful speakers at Vanport. I'm guessing you were talking about the preacher that was speaking there. He was tremendous. I'll say it now. I wasn't going to say it there to be respectful, but it was like, oh my goodness, he could make this Jewish white boy go to a service. He was amazing, an amazing speaker, it was just. You weren't there. I'm not saying that to belittle you, but it was times 10. Whatever you felt watching that, it was literally times 10. Yeah, the Chuds were definitely not very numerous that day. And again, by multiple reports, what I heard is they were already drinking heavy by 9 or 10 in the morning there. So it kind of goes to show, they needed liquid courage. That's not true. I don't know why you're drinking at 9 or 10 in the morning, because the only other... if you're drinking at 9 or 10 in the morning, that's typically a blinking red light on your dashboard of life, especially if you're doing that as a normal thing. And there's help for that. And I actually say that not with snark, but with empathy. And if you really do have a problem in that area, and there was drunk driving arrest. So, at what? 1 o'clock, 1:32 in the afternoon, somebody's drunk driving. Man, you've been rolling if you get in a drunk driving arrest at 1 or 2 in the afternoon. What do I think of the possibility of civil war? That's an interesting question. I feel a little better about it than I did, say, a week ago, if you asked me that a week ago. I do believe we're in a state of sectarian violence right now. There's no question in my mind of that. I think that we have... the strongest chance of civil war in this country, say, since 1858, since 1858 or 1860. I really do think that we're that close. However, I think when people hear civil war, what people think is this army, that army, and no, that's not. Civil war in the United States, if we have a second civil war, is going to look a lot more, say, like Northern Ireland. Basically, you're just going to have this intense sectarian violence. You're going to have this hit and run things. We're going to do this parade, and we're going to do it in your neighborhood to piss you off, and no, you're not. Then you're going to have street battles, and then the police will pick one side or the other, depending on the community, depending on who did first, or what goes on. And that's what I think. If we fall past sectarian violence into the next tier, then that's the next thing that happens. And then you kind of run into these things that, well, maybe you go into a black-owned business and that business gets blown up, or maybe you go into a biker's bar and somebody blows that up. Right? I'm being that's the kind of stuff we're seeing that we could potentially see if we slip into civil war. This isn't going to be army against army. And I think what will happen is that the government will clearly pick a side. And I think that just depends who's in the White House. And then the next thing is where does the military fall in all of this? Because right now I still firmly believe that the Pentagon is still led mostly by adults who are committed in their instruction and what they have been taught at their military academies and in their oaths to protect the Constitution above and all, and to respect the peaceful transfer of power. We can hope. Anyway, that's my view on that. Yeah, I don't know who the preacher's name is, but you know what? We could research and we could find out, but it may take a little... There were a ton of inspiring speakers. I totally agree. You couldn't watch past 7:30 because I had a Zoom meeting. They both yelled at each other a lot, and Trump said a lot of lies, and Biden said a couple. That's basically it. And Chris Wallace got super frustrated with Trump. Super duper mega frustrated. I can't. Yes, you can. You just on the mouse. You go click, 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 click with the mouse, because I've done it on the computer. I don't know, Dora, and I don't want to get it wrong because I don't want to be disrespectful and I don't want to get it wrong. Yeah, Brenda, that's a great question. Brenda, you've probably asked one of the best questions of the night. It's a great question. You know, where Biden's statement on it's a few bad apples, and Biden's statement about how integrated suburbia is, right? And it's not. He's wrong. It's tone deaf, right? We know that suburbia is not as integrated as he thinks. What's interesting is when you look at statistics, when you look at government statistics, in rural America is actually becoming more integrated. It's part of the reason why there is so much angst in rural America, because rural America is starting to see population growth after decades of declines. But that population growth is almost all person of color. It is almost all Hispanic. White is moving out. Black is moving out. Indigenous is kind of treading water. And it is POC, person of color, Hispanic, that is growing in there. When I say POC, because it's BIPOC, so it's just, I'm just using an acronym. I'm not, there's no disrespect. So I do think Biden was very, very tone deaf on that. You know, it's a gotcha question for Biden, right? Of course, because if Biden says, well, and Biden described, try to describe his vision of what defund to him is, which aligns with my view of defund, right? Unburden, demilitarize. And he kind of tap danced around that. One other thing I want to point out, where Biden called out going, you're not law and order, you're cutting $400 million from money that will go to police departments. I was actually kind of like, no way. I honestly, when Biden said that, I was just like, that has to be like a lie, or it's 40 million. Did he skip a group? No. And we put that up. It's again up in the chats. It is true. Trump is slashing money that goes to police departments from the feds, $400 million. That was a factual statement. It's pretty stunning. Biden was tone deaf, just straight up tone deaf. And he tap danced around. And Wallace tap danced around the question, which just goes to show how awkward the whole thing about equality and, Black Lives Matter and the movement and, the ending of systemic racism is so challenging to even talk about, because Chris Wallace was like, do you support the Black Lives? What I mean is, well, this, right? And it was like borderline not even a question by the time he kind of sputtered out what he wanted to ask of Biden. I think it would have been interesting if he'd asked Trump the same question, just so you could get a racist rant from him and a no, because it would be great play on a commercial. Anyway, that's my view. And that's one of the reasons why I say I don't think that, neither party side, issued a knockout punch. However, the bar that was set for Biden is that he wouldn't even be able to stand up for 90 minutes, and that he wouldn't be able to speak in sentences. He spoke in clear and coherent paragraphs for 90 minutes straight. And so that's where the bar is at. And that's why I say it's a close baseball game. It was close all the way through, but he won. But I do think that is one for Biden, where it was like, I got it. I dropped the ball. What do I do? Yeah, it was tone deaf. It's totally tone deaf. Generational thing, right? I come from the suburbs, and then he describes the suburbs. Now, full stop. The street that I live on is like the flippin' United Nations here. We have people up and down our street that are from all different countries. And we have people that are on the street here that are person of color, and there are people here that come from 1, 2, 3, 4 continents on our street. So take that for what you want. But on the other side of the coin, the town that I live in is one of I'm blessed. I'm blessed. I'm privileged. I use my privilege to amplify Black voices. I use my resources to amplify Black voices, and I risk my privilege to amplify Black voices. But straight up readily admit, I live in one of the wealthiest communities in the United States. Straight up admit it. But I'm an ally. Here's the deal. Well, again, Dora, I think here's the problem with this, and I'm probably going to piss off some followers. And if you don't, I'm not obsessed with followers, right? And if you're looking for bye. I'll just say that in advance. If you want to listen and stick around and go, I don't agree with you, but I'm going to stick around anyway. Well, you can do that too. And I know there's some people that are very left that occasionally go, you're wrong, but they stick around. And if you look in the comments, there's some people that are Republicans go, look, I'm really trying to understand you all. And sometimes I just want to put my head to the keyboard. And this is how I feel. But they do it in a respectful way. And we love you. We really love you. Both sides. Because at least you want to have the conversation. We love you for wanting to have the conversation. I can't stress that enough. Here's the problem. We have a country that is like, how right? Like we're getting to Germany 1933 right. So you can't you can't go and just pull everybody over to the left. You can't, because the country isn't going to accept it. And then you are going to end up with, and I know for some people, it's like, that's a BS answer. It's not a BS answer. Why are people protesting in the streets now because it has been such a hard pull to the right. And if you do this hard pull in the other direction and all that momentum swings the other way, you're going to have a ton of, right? Then you are going to further energize right-wing nationalists, and it will get uglier. And that's the danger. And so do I think that Biden meant what he said in that I'm going to listen to community advocates and police departments and we're going to pull them all together and sit down at the table and we're going to try? Yes, I do believe it. Do I believe that this is going to align to defund police by 50%, put that money into the communities, no new youth jails? I'm listing off Seattle demands. Jenny Durkin design. Why do I forget number 4 all the time? I think I forget number 4 because it is it's tied into one of the other 4, and to me, my brain just goes, but you checked the box when you said that one there. Defund 50%, put that money into the communities, no youth jail, which basically got Jenny Durkin to resign. And I'm forgetting the 4th, and I'll look at the other one here. And of course, Jenny Durkin designed, Biden could care less about that. No youth jail, Biden could care less. Oh, free all the protesters. That's number 5. Free all the protesters. Do I think Biden's going to go, yeah, we're defunding the police department? No, not at all. Anybody thinking that? I'd love to talk to you about some oceanfront property in Arizona after this. If you really think that's how that's going to go down, because no. Do I think at least Biden's going to sit at the table and try to make some changes, some systemic changes within the construct of what we can do, particularly on who controls the Senate? Absolutely. Another thing here, like Biden said, super predators. We fact check that. Now, admittedly, right, we're trying to fact check in real time, so I didn't have the time to go way down in the rabbit hole. But we couldn't find anywhere where he said it. He said things close to it. But I think it's very important to point out that in 1992, 93, 94, when all of this was being kicked around, politicians from both parties basically across the board were saying these things. This was pushed, and I know Republicans go, well, we didn't vote for that. Yeah, the reason they didn't vote for it is because it wasn't strong enough. If you go and you read the things, the conditions, it wasn't harsh enough because this was a weak sauce piece of legislation. That's why they didn't vote for it. So is it true they didn't vote for it? Yes. When you dive into why they didn't vote for it, it's not because they thought it was awful and horrible and racist and was a giant step backwards for systemic racism. It's because it didn't go far enough. Thank you, Lucy. It's funny, like, because it popped into my head. I'll see if anybody here has any more questions, and if not, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. And as I said, you're going to have to bear with me because the lights are off. So I don't know why. I'm just supposed to be able to push this button right here. See, I'm pushing this button right here. You can't see me pushing the button. There we go. I'm supposed to push this button right here. It's focusing on my face. There we go. I have narrow field of focus on here. I don't have a cam op, so I'm relying on autofocus. Anyway, I push this button here. I cross my focus marks. People in production knows what that means. F2, if you're in production, I'm shooting at 1080p, 30 frames per second, cameras at 1/60th, f2, ISO 100. We got the studio lights going here. See if there's any other questions. There isn't any other questions. All right. Thank you everybody for tuning in. To summarize, what do I think? One, I think the Proud Boys aren't as organized and have as much strength in as numbers and periods they think. I do think that they use terror tactics. And I think that to say anything otherwise is just, it is what it is. But I don't think they're strong. I think Trump sent a very clear signal to white nationalists and the Proud Boys in particular that you are essentially my brown shirts. And then a couple of minutes later, watch the polls so we know what their marching orders are. It's voter intimidation because maybe you can win the election that way. I think Biden came out on top, but, there was no knockout punch here. What I'm going to wonder at this point, there's 3 more debates, right? So my wonder is Trump going to go, I wasn't treated fairly by Fox. Mike Wallace was terrible, and Mike Wallace was mean to me, and he wouldn't let me talk. And I actually think that Mike Wallace probably pushed, Mike Wallace, about the only thing he had left was, to point to somebody to turn off Trump's microphone. I think Mike Wallace, under the circumstances, did about as best as he could, particularly when he reminded the president, hey, your people set the conditions, 2 minutes uninterrupted, and you agreed to it. Now, adhere to what you agreed to and what your people agreed to, which is very telling for the character of the president. The last thing I will say, when Joe Biden said, oh, shut up, it's a zing, it's worth a little giggle. I didn't like it. I didn't like it. To me, that's not a yeah, plus that wasn't a score. To me, that's, that was like a bulk pitch. I'm using that baseball analogy. Look it up if you don't know what a bulk is. That was a bulk pitch, or that was like, throwing at the head of the batter or something. It's, kind of something like, the crowd boos afterwards. Did he deserve it? Yeah. But, it's like, dude, this isn't me. Like when they go high, when they go low, we go high. It's not that. It's just, I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm Gen X and I still think that there should be respect at this level. And, I certainly don't get Twitter diplomacy at all. I'm like, why the hell are all the world leaders using Twitter? Like, what the hell is that about? Are you flipping kidding me? All right. I have to walk over here to hit the closing video thing because I don't know what happened. So we'll have to work that one out. So bye from Studio 2. And we, essentially, we have Studio 1. Tons of stuff has been Studio 1. We have kind of what we jokingly call the Starbucks room. We'll do stuff down in the Starbucks room. I haven't done a pillow talk in a long time, but lately, that time for me has been decompression time. Streamer burnout in this is very, very real. And when you are exposing yourself to kind of all of this stuff that's going on and you're witnessing human suffering and human hatred, and human injustice, and you're just, seeing this for hours and hours and hours and hours, it eats at you. And so that's why there hasn't been a whole lot of pillow talk lately, because I've really just been using that time to kind of read and post some stuff and watch videos and just have my quiet time. So with that, malcontents, that's enough of that. I think this went pretty good. I like Studio 2. I like this. So malcontent almost out.